All right, we won't get many more stories like this, so let's enjoy it. Trump takes office in 10 days, and he'll have both chambers of Congress behind him, so President Biden is taking strategic measures to ensure that Trump can't act on his worst impulses. And of course, with Congress and the Supreme Court behind him, there's only so much anyone can do, but today, Biden issued sweeping deportation protections before Trump takes office, protecting thousands of people from Sudan, Ukraine, and Venezuela, allowing them to stay in the country temporarily. And we'll dig into that. But first, I'd like to talk about something else that he did, which I really appreciate. President Biden today enacted stronger sanctions on Russia, the strongest sanctions yet, and it's because he's not shackled by election prospects anymore. You know, Biden's been walking a tightrope for the past few years, especially when this war first started, because he was getting hit from both sides. Both sides were spreading disinformation, including Russia. But now you can tell that he's unshackled. I think Biden's been a brilliant domestic president. He's passed more legislation than Trump could ever have dreamed of passing in one term. But I think there's a valid argument that right off the bat, he should have been stronger with sanctions on Russia. Right off the bat, he could have been stronger and helped Ukraine even more. There is a convincing argument. And, you know, I'll let Zelensky make that argument himself, and then we'll jump into exactly what Biden did. Make sure you drop a like. Make sure you subscribe for more pro-democracy content. This was Zelensky on the Lex Friedman podcast a few days back.
I only asked for two things. Send us weapons, or better yet, strengthen us with preventive measures so there would be no war. It wasn't the weapons that I was asking for. I asked for sanctions. Intimidate him. Please don't say that. If he comes, if he crosses borders, if he kills, we're imposing sanctions. Well, this is complete bullshit. Sorry, but really?
Oh, I understand this.
Oh, wonderful. Yes.
I understood one word.
Yeah.
Zelensky isn't trying to put Biden down right here. He's just saying that it's a little bit weird to only sanction Vladimir Putin after he starts killing people, after they start abducting children. You need preventative sanctions, measures that would have deterred Russia before the invasion even began, or at least that would have made it a lot harder for Russia to invade. Because after they invaded, after the sanctions hit, then they were able to sort of turn it into a wartime economy that was sustainable. But Zelensky's just saying the reactive measures were too little, too late, even though he does appreciate President Biden, just like we do. But President Biden's caution may have been rooted in this careful diplomacy that he's known forever, but in the grand scheme, it allowed Putin to act without the immediate fear of crushing consequences. So, fast forward to today, Biden has imposed the sweeping sanctions on Russia's oil and gas revenues, and I honestly think it's because he's not shackled by the election prospects anymore, right? So this says, U.S. President Joe Biden's administration imposed its broadest package of sanctions so far, targeting Russia's oil and gas revenues on Friday, in an effort to give Kyiv and Trump's incoming team more leverage to reach a deal for peace in Ukraine, because this deal is all going to be about leverage. You can't negotiate from a position of weakness. You need to be in a position of strength, and that's why President Biden should have taken the preventative measures. We want to make Ukraine as strong as possible. The ultimate way to make Ukraine strong would be allowing them into NATO, but much of Ukraine is currently occupied, so we can't quite do that yet. The move is meant to cut Russia's revenues for continuing the war in Ukraine that has killed more than 12,300 civilians and reduced cities to rubble since Moscow invaded in February of 2022, almost 3 years ago now. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in a post on X that the measures announced on Friday will deliver a significant blow to Moscow. So, of course, Zelensky is still our ally. He's critiquing Biden in a constructive way. Quote, the less revenue Russia earns from oil, the sooner peace will be restored, Zelensky added. Dilip Singh, a top White House economic and national security advisor, said in a statement that the measures were the, quote, most significant sanctions yet on Russia's energy sector, by far the largest source of revenue for Putin's war. And this may hurt prices for U.S. consumers to some extent, but I mean, we're largely independent from Russian oil at this point, so it doesn't matter. The U.S. Treasury imposed sanctions on two large companies, which explore for produce, and sell oil, as well as 183 vessels that have shipped Russian oil, many of which are in the so-called shadow fleet of aging tankers operated by non-Western companies. The sanctions also include networks that trade the petroleum. Many of the tankers have been used to ship oil to India and China, as a price cap imposed by the group of 7 countries in 2022 has shifted trade in Russian oil from Europe to Asia. Some tankers have shipped both Russian and Iranian oil. So immediately, we saw global oil prices jump more than 3% ahead of the announcement, but that's not Biden's problem anymore. That is Trump's problem to deal with, and also it helps Ukraine. So I think in the grand scheme of things, it's worth it. But they also said, quote, "We see ourselves as no longer constrained by tight supply in global markets the way we were when the price cap mechanism was unveiled, because new volumes of oil are expected to come online this year from the US, Ghana, Canada, and Brazil, and possibly out of the Middle East to help fill in for any lost Russian supply." Just a side note, I've seen that Syria and Ukraine have been working together, which makes my heart so incredibly happy because my grandparents are from Syria. My dad is Muslim. I'm personally not Muslim, but my family was from Damascus, so they have very close ties. And number one, they were so happy when Assad fled, but also it's so great to see the new leaders taking a pro-democracy stance. And I believe the deal was, hey, we'll help out Ukraine if Ukraine gives us like wheat and food. It's just so nice to see. So nice to see these two countries working together. And the reversal of this decision would involve Congress. One of the Biden officials said it was entirely up to President-elect Trump, a Republican who takes office, when and on what terms he might lift sanctions imposed during the Biden era. But to do so, he would have to notify Congress and give it the ability to take a vote of disapproval, he said. Many Republican members of Congress had urged Biden to impose Friday's sanctions, so it's not like Trump would get the reversal easily. Quote, "Trump's people can't just come in and quietly lift everything that Biden did. Congress would have to be involved." Now, keep in mind, Trump promised to end the war right after being elected, and some people think he meant 24 hours after taking office, but either way, both of those promises would have been broken because advisors to Trump have floated proposals that would effectively cede large parts of Ukraine to Russia for the foreseeable future, which is a terrible, terrible deal that Ukraine should not take. And also, Russia literally denied Trump's first proposal and said, dude, Biden already tried that proposal a few years back. That's naive to think that we're just going to take that. But I say this all the time, ceding Ukrainian land, number one, emboldens other dictators across the globe, the same way that Trump's insane rhetoric regarding Greenland does. But also, Russia's entire strategy is to pause wars when it serves their interest and then reignite them after they've rearmed. I always point to this, but in 2008, they invaded Georgia. After invading Georgia, they took a break, relaunched the invasion into Crimea in 2014. They took a break, and then they launched a full-scale invasion 8 years later. So they like to take pauses and rearm. It's strategically beneficial to them. But there's another story that I'd like to talk about because Biden just issued sweeping deportation protections before Trump takes office. The move allows hundreds of thousands of people from Sudan, Ukraine, and Venezuela to stay in the country temporarily. It gives vulnerable populations certain legal protections so Trump can't deport them and deport their families. Remember, the Haitian migrants in Ohio were legalized under the Trump administration. The Trump administration helped protect their status, and now he wants to deport them. It's all just a game to him. The Biden admin on Friday issued sweeping extensions of deportation protections for hundreds of thousands of people from Sudan, Ukraine, Venezuela, in a move that will make it almost impossible for President-elect Trump to swiftly strip the benefit when he takes office. And of course, we can't completely stop Trump from acting on his worst impulses. They've learned a lot from their first term, and he's got all these loyalists around him that will allow him to bend every single rule and norm. But Biden can try. He can try to slow Trump down and make it so that Ukraine has a little bit more leverage, so that Trump doesn't get as many judicial appointees, which is what he did a few weeks back. He's banned a lot of offshore drilling. In a sweeping motion last week, he banned 675 million acres from being drilled on, which is great. And now he's doing that with immigration. The extension of temporary protected status, as the program is called, allows the immigrants to remain in the country with work permits and a shield from deportation for another 18 months from the expiration of their current protection in the spring. Late last year, Antony Blinken recommended the protection be extended in a series of letters. For decades, Democratic and Republican administrations have designated the protection for citizens of countries that are in upheaval and deemed unsafe to return to. President Biden has expanded who could receive the status as war erupted in Ukraine and instability gripped countries like Venezuela and Haiti. Quote, "These designations are rooted in careful review and interagency collaboration to ensure those affected by environmental disasters, war, instability are given the protections they need while continuing to contribute meaningfully to our communities," said Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security. Now, Trump has vowed to end the program, at least for certain countries, but it's not really that simple. Immigrant advocates have been urging the Biden admin to extend it for many of those countries before Trump takes office. In his first term, Trump was able to successfully terminate the status for about 400,000 people from El Salvador and other countries, arguing that conditions there had changed and the protection was no longer warranted. The move was challenged in court and did not take effect, but he's expected to try again during his second term as part of his pledge to conduct mass deportations. This new move, of course, makes it legally difficult for Trump to roll back the protections for citizens in the four countries, at least until they expire sometime in 2026. Quote, "Because President Biden has extended protection for the nationals of all these countries, President Trump will be unable to deport these individuals anytime soon." Quote, "Trump can't ignore what Congress wrote into law in 1990. So just to take a step back, Biden's moves aren't really just about short-term wins. They're about fortifying America, protecting our institutions against Trump's worst impulses and his destructive tendencies. And I'm not going to say that Trump can't act on these. He'll still be able to. But by safeguarding sanctions, protecting certain vulnerable groups of immigrants, Biden is ensuring that the U.S. does maintain a good amount of credibility on the global stage, or at least he's pointing Trump in the right direction. He's like picking Trump up by the ear and being like, "We're going to protect Ukraine whether we like it or not. Here are some sanctions that you can't quite undo." And this matters because Trump's rhetoric is dangerous. Even if Trump doesn't invade Greenland like he's kind of posturing towards, even saying that, even posturing about using military or economic coercion against our allies can erode decades of trust with other allies. And those allies, keep in mind, Denmark was a founding member of NATO. NATO was created after World War II to stop the world from ever devolving into such chaos again, because World War II was the bloodiest conflict in human history, and it's worked. I know we've had Vietnam, and there's been a lot of stuff in the Middle East, but there has not been another world war, and Trump eroding this trust with our NATO allies gets us closer to World War. For the party that was constantly crying and screaming and pissing and shitting about World War III just because we were protecting Ukraine, they sure don't care. Actually, they line up when Trump says that we're going to erode our alliances with other NATO countries. So Biden's actions also show a good level of leadership. Like I said in the beginning of the video, he's been a great president domestically, but he's been sort of walking a tightrope for all of these years. And now he's just like, F it. I don't care if gas prices go up. I don't care if this happens. We are going to protect Ukraine. We are going to make sure that we are in a good position. So Biden's measures here are smart. They're strategic. Some of them are long overdue, but I'm glad that he's doing them. And the timing is no coincidence. 10 days before Trump takes office. Trump will probably try to undo this all, but Biden at least built the foundation to safeguard some of our institutions and some immigrants. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like, subscribe. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.